Hello my lovely friends, how are you today? This is Jem for Jessie James Beads. Just checking that my speakers are off and nothing untoward's going to happen. Technology wise, I've had one of those days. How's your day going? What have you been up to? I always love to get your weather reports. It's actually quite pleasant here today, not too hot. Hasn't tipped it down. That's English for rained lots, so that's really good. Monday was a bit torrential. Bit scary if I'm honest. Anyway, I hope that you're doing well and you're having a lovely day no matter what it is you've been up to. I'm just going to press some buttons and let you have a look at our project today. I'm going to chat about it a little bit whilst I make sure that we are indeed going out on Facebook, because sometimes it's really hard to know if it actually is or isn't. So let's have a quick look and press some buttons whilst you're having a look at today's lovely project. It sure looks like we're there, so let's have a gander and see if anything is happening. Debbie is in from Oregon. I'm seeing comments. Happy days. So while that is starting up, let's have a quick look and see at what the project is we're going to work together today. So I've chosen Leprechaun from the Pantone collection. Any of the Pantone strands are the perfect length to work with this project. I'm just going to give it a quick measure because I can't actually remember how long these strands are. I think they're 7? Yeah, it's a 7-inch strand. So really any 7-inch Jessie James bead strand, but the Pantone strands are perfect. Now in the UK I've put the availability for this beautiful green hued strand. Susan's in from Florida. Jacqueline's also from Florida and Facebook. Good for you. That makes the most sense in the world. How are you, my loves? Are you having a good day? I do so hope that yours is better tech-wise than mine is. Now for our project today, I have added in some memory wire. If you don't have memory wire, you may simply use the heaviest strand of wire that you can get through the centre, or you could even go for traditional beading thread. I'll still show you how to use a hammer and block to create this ultra heavy little clasp on the end. MC is in from Kathy in Greenville, TX, that's Texas, right? Lovely Cherie is in from Oregon. How are you, my darling? Did I already say hello to Susan from Florida? Colleen's from Long Beach. Sounds amazing. Jacqueline says, just came from the beach. Can't have a bad morning. I love the ocean. I live, by terms of the UK, very far. I'm about as inland as you can get, which is a bit rubbish when you love the sea as much as I do. One day, might retire to Cornwall, might retire to South Wales, haven't decided yet. So we're looking at the Leprechaun Pantone strand today. Any of those 7-inch bead strands from Jessie James Beads will work. Any of the Pantone strands will work. They are beautiful. Carol's in from West Columbia, SC. Is that Southern Carolina? For the first time? Well, welcome to Jessie James Beads. My name is Jem. If we've never met, I live in the UK and I'd just like to give you a big wave. Hello. Welcome to Jessie James Beads. Thank you so much. Cherie says gorgeous beads. Jacqueline has already said about the beach. That is very true. Yep, the comments have gone crazy, so I guess you're there. I just can't see them anymore. This is par for the course for Facey. Anyway, any of the Pantone strands will work. Any of the 7-inch bead strands will work. This is a really lovely one because you've got these big chunky washers. I'm not sure what the material is. I'm going to work with some memory wire for you today. Letitia's in. Good morning from Las Vegas. Good morning to you, darling. Hope you're having a lovely day. How hot is it in LV? What we're going to do to begin with is have a quick look at the project. Let's pop those out of the way. So I had a spare bead. And if you're going to have a spare bead, it's nice to have a fancy one, isn't it? Super fancy. Lizzie's in from Washington State. Hello to you, my friend. I hope you're having a lovely day. How's the weather? Beautiful sparkle on those. That's my spare. Now if you wanted to make a slightly larger size than I have made, you could put this into the clasp as well. I'm going to show you the clasp and I'm going to show you how to wrangle memory wire. Let's wrangle some beads, shall we? Hello Jem from Iowa, says Melissa. Good to have your company, my darling. Thank you so much. If I don't shout you out on the live, it's because the comments are crazy and they don't always show. Debbie says in Oregon we're finally having a cool morning before the weather heats up. We've been having a big heat wave. Wowzers. Oregon looks like such a pretty place. Mind you, that said, I've yet to see a place that isn't pretty. So let's have a look at the project together. I've used all bar one of those beads. Spare bead would look lovely as a pendant. You're totally correct there, Cherie. Shaquita, happy Saturday. Happy Saturday to you, my love. And if I've mispronounced your name again, forgive me. I can't hold things in my head for too long. Memory's a bit rubbish, to be perfectly honest. So I've used a little bit of extra heavy wire to make this clasp. I'm going to show you that later. If you were lucky enough to join us on the summer camp, you will have a block and hammer and deadening pad for underneath. If you don't have a hammer of any kind, I'm going to show you how you can almost get this effect anyway without. Nice if you do have a hammer. 84 degrees right now, but it's early. Wow, that sounds warm. Sherry Ann says happy Saturday, everyone. Ah, Debbie. Jacqueline says, I'll be in Eugene next month. Are you close? Good. I love it when our peeps get together. So let's unleash the beads, shall we? Let me take the spare bead out of the way for now. And let's pop it into my dish. This is the strand we're looking at today. Any of those gorgeous Pantone strands are going to work because they're the perfect length. Lizzie says it's warm in Washington. It's perfect temperature here today. Not too hot. Now, I'm going to give you fair warning. These are my beautiful, beautiful flush cutters. This is the only time I'm going to be using them for most of the tutorial. And the reason for that is do not use these on your memory wire. It's a very, very sad day. Memory wire is a hardened steel. These are designed for cutting copper and craft wires. They're incredible. If you use it to cut memory wire, sometimes you're lucky and it's okay, sometimes not. Let's unleash the beads. Unleash the beads. Whoosh. Oh no, one escaped. How rude. So you can use them in whatever order you want. Obviously, if you don't have the Leprechaun strand, then just use whatever number of beads, whatever bead order you fancy. We're currently working with Leprechaun. I've popped a link. We have some availability on the UK site. If you are in the UK, sign up for emails because a bit of an offer on at the moment. Leprechaun. That's what we're working with right now. As I say, any of the Pantone strands. This is really cool because you get those big saucer beads on the end and you can use them as a part of your clasp. I think they're very cool. If you don't have these, that's fine. We can simply make one with metal anyway. That's the joy of working with wire, is that you can play around with making your own component parts. So let's have a look at the memory wire, shall we? And then we'll look at bead order. Let's pop that one over there. And let's pop that one over there. So I have 1.5 turns of memory wire. I'm going to be working with my very ugly, very old end snips. I've had these since the actual dawn of time. Not really. It's close though. Almost 6,000 years. And these are perfect for memory wire. They are a hardened steel tool to work on a hardened steel wire. I cannot tell you enough. Working with memory wire, put away your beautiful flush cutters. I was also lucky enough to receive some Beadalon memory wire pliers. Now these are very similar to your bail making pliers. If you have bail makers, you can use those. If you have round nose pliers, you can use those. But these are a very cool little addition. They're incredibly sturdy. So what I want to do is to put a loop on one end. Now there are a number of schools of thought with memory wire as to how many loops you put on the end. When I first started working with memory wire about 12 years ago, I would always put a double loop on the end for strength and security. What I found is, over time, that will catch on things. So I have now switched to creating a single loop at either end of my memory wire bracelets. Now this is it's a 55mm bunch. Let me just see what that is in inches. So it's around about just over 2 inches across. Around about a 2-inch diameter. So what I tend to do before I get stuck in is put a loop on one end, and I use the larger side on my memory wire pliers. So you can have it going sideways or you can have it in the same orientation as the rest of the wire. It's absolutely up to you. I'll show you sideways, I think. So I'm going to grip very firmly with those 2 prongs of the memory wire, if I get those out of the way. and I'm going to twist around by using my non-dominant thumb underneath to apply pressure, so that when I create this quite springy circular form, it just crosses over at the end. I just want it to just slightly cross over. So you can see how we've got a loop and there's a bit of an overlap. I'm then going to use my traditional favourite pair of pliers ever. They used to be purple, they're kind of dark red now. I've had these a very long time too. So what I'm going to do then is put the tip of those pliers inside that circular form we've just made using the memory wire pliers and very firmly push an angle. It's almost like making an open and closable loop with memory wire. And I'm going to make sure that I'm happy with that angle and that the end of the memory wire itself touches against that angle that we've created. Now, if you don't have memory wire in your stock, sorry, dog hair, let's get rid of that, you can make this with traditional beading thread. Just pop the beads onto your beading material and crimp. So it's not an absolute necessity, but it is fun to work with, and sometimes people are a little bit concerned by it. So as I said, it was 1.5 turns of that memory wire. What I'm going to do is put this out of the way and let's decide on a bead order now. So there's my spare bead. Oh look, I now have some fun earrings to make later. Let's go for the bead order, shall we? Now I tend to finish my memory wire projects with a small bead as possible. So I think we're going to replicate the exact same bracelet. You know the little spacers that you get at the end of these Pantone Strands? I never discard them. I save them forever and ever. And then we're going to have one of the golden toned daisy spacers, the filigree bead cap. Let's go for, essentially I suppose it's a bicone, and then another filigree, the tall bead caps. Hello Donna in Nebraska, how are you my lovely? Are you having a beautiful day? Give me a weather report. Let's just pop these into order. Now the reason I haven't prepared this before our live together today is because I wanted you to see the beads on the strand first. Whoop. These are beautiful filigree bead caps as well. It's almost like a little waffle, or it's almost a Celtic knot. It's like an endless knot. So then I'm going to put one of those beautiful rondelles in, and then one of the lighter green smaller beads. So these are rounds, and I think these are a dark, very, very sultry green on those rondelles. And then we're going to have one of these huge metallic, let me just show you that end on, it's a gorgeous colour, absolutely fabulous. After that we're going to go for a round, and then what I did is to put these two heavy bead caps together so that they just mesh in. There's a little bit of tension in a project like this, so they don't have to stay side by side, but I kind of like that. If you didn't like that, you could put them either side of the heavy metal bead. Well, that sounds amusing. So you can change the bead order to make yourself happy, but this is what I quite fancied. So let's just get that bead order replicated, coming back in the opposite direction. Make sure that I haven't dropped one on the floor, because that is pretty much what I tend to do. Bead cap, bicone. Where's the next bead cap gone? There it is. And then the sultry dark green with the sheen on it. Huggles, Gem and everyone from Jessica. Joyce says, a cool spell in Dallas, only 84 degrees, going to be 93. Wow. I'm not going to lie, that sounds incredibly toasty to me. Then we've got bead cap, bicone, bead cap, finishing up with daisy spacer in gold and one of those silver toned spacer beads. These are actually such good quality. Please don't ever discard them, they're brilliant to use. And that will leave you with these three pieces. So I'm going to take this bead and add it to my spare bead pile. Might do something with that at another point. Might make a pair of earrings. And then these I'm going to use to create part of the clasp device that we're going to work with today. So we're going to feed all of those beads onto the memory wire. Now when you're working with memory wire, it pays to just keep that end bit ever so slightly straight whilst you load your beads on. Once the beads are on, because the memory wire is so fine, it will be quite accepting and tolerant. When I'm working with a heavy wire, a heavy copper wire, what you'll find is a wire of copper that is this thin is nowhere near as strong. So the reason memory wire works and is more flexible is because it has gone through a treatment that hardens it. What that treatment is, I have no idea. I just know that you can get good size beads onto these, that it doesn't have to be super large hole beads, and it will still work really, really nicely without stressing the beads out, because it's super fine but also super strong. So the boring part is watching me put beads on a strand. At least it's quicker than watching me put seed beads on literally anything. So what would normally happen if I was using a 1mm gauge wire and I was putting a long bead like this, if there was any curvature, I might have a problem. That's just me failing to find the end. There's nothing wrong with the bead or the memory wire. There we go. But because memory wire is fine for its strength, you get much more flexibility. It's wonderful media to work with. Medium, sorry. Just going to add these beads on. Again, a bead like this, if you're using curvature in a heavier wire, you might struggle. So this is the centre point. Jem, hey Jem from sunny California, says Susan. Hello Susan, my love. It's really good to have your company. Thanks for hopping on. We're working with memory wire and Pantone Strand Leprechaun. We're going to do a little bit of hammering in a minute as well, which is always fun. Donna says, JJB every day. Yes. In Tampa, it's 95, so in our winter, when our temp is like 65 to 70, we pull out our leather jackets. Northerners just don't understand our putting leather on, especially at the beach. I was in Egypt 20 odd years ago, and it was during what they would refer to as winter because it's north of the central line. So I was there in February. It was 28 degrees, so I was paddling around in what they thought was a very, very cold ocean, and they were there in their parka jackets looking at me like I was a bit strange. Jem, are you on every Saturday? I'm on Saturday today. I'm on Saturday next week. And then I will be moving to a new time. I'm going to be coming to you on Thursdays at 1 PM Eastern Time. But for now, for today and for next week, for the remainder of August, I'm going to still come to you Saturday noon Eastern. So that's today and next week only. And then I move to my new time. So you can see that 1.5 turns of that 55mm or just over 2 inch of memory wire, far more than we need. What I will say is sometimes, don't know about you, but sometimes things don't go to plan. So I like to have a little bit of extra which I can use. Now I will simply not waste this. I will turn this into a half hoop earring, which I might show you at some point in the future if you like me working with memory wire. So I am now going to grab my bent chain nose pliers to put a little angle on the end here. Now, in order for my two central beads to kind of clasp together, I want just a little bit of tension. And that's another reason I will always end a memory wire bracelet with metal beads. Any tension that I'm creating, I want to put my pliers against metal, just to ensure that I don't damage those beads. So I'm going to put a little bit of an angle coming away like so. And you can see that that end bead wants to escape, and that's absolutely fine because I'll just push it back down and say, no, desist. Debbie says, thanks for the heads up. Cherie says, thank you, dear. I do enjoy watching and listening to you. That's very, very kind of you. I appreciate it. I do talk an awful lot, and some people are not into that. So it's really lovely for me to have people that are into that. So what I'm going to do is take my beautiful pliers designed especially for memory wire, start rotating that around to create the circular form. Now in exactly the same way as I teach doing wrapped and simple loops, you can do that in 2 sections. It's much easier to show you on screen in 2 sections. So I've created the first half. I don't think I've gone far enough for that angle, so I'm just going to very carefully move that out. Now you can snap memory wire if you're naughty with it, so you don't have to be naughty with it. Let's draw that tail all the way around to finish off that loop on the far end. Now we don't want these loops to be too small, otherwise we won't be able to get these sections in. These bad boys are super cool. If you don't have them, you don't really need them. I just thought it was a cool way to use them. I agree, Cherie. Oh, thanks, Debbie. That's really lovely. Now again, when cutting memory wire, please use cutters for the job. These are hardened steel end nips. I have had these from before the time I was making jewellery. These are a tool that I would use in a garage. So they're very, very hard. They're not heavy, they're not large, but they are incredibly tough. So I'm going to line up that snip over the angle and cut, hopefully, the correct piece. Now this I will make into a half hoop earring. Let me just flip you up to the other camera for a second, if that wants to work for a moment. So what I mean by a half hoop is I'll create a small loop at the top and then hang the earring like so. Got funny hair today, so if I turn my head like this, it sits like the front half of a large hoop. So hoop earrings, especially large hoop earrings, aren't for everyone. But I love a half hoop earring because you've got half the weight. If you don't have to have a huge, great big walk around like that with your ears dragged down, then why would you? But some even 3mm crystals will look beautiful on something like, excuse me, I can't catch my breath. It's because I talk too much. Even a half hoop like this, absolutely rammed with crystals, is still light enough to wear, and it gives the effect of a full hoop earring. So don't throw away your little half sections of memory wire for bracelets. Although you might not make a bracelet out of it, it will still be useful. Let's get back on with our project. So we've made the main part of our bracelet already. So what I want to do is show you how to add these pieces in. Now this is a one-shot manoeuvre. Are those cutters the only ones we should use to cut memory wires? You can get memory wire cutters. If you weren't here at the beginning, what I have to do with my beautiful flush cutters when I'm working with memory wire is I have to put them out of reach. I have ruined a pair of beautiful flush cutters, exactly the same brand and style as this, by using them about 6 times on memory wire, and it ended up notching the blades. That's because these are made for craft and copper wire up to a certain dimension. It says maximum cut 2mm copper wire. So it's made for a certain hardness, a certain temper of wire. You can use it on all of your craft wires, but when you're using memory wire, I have to put them out of the way. So these are inexpensive old tools that I've had forever and ever. So just if you buy memory wire cutters, they will be hardened especially for the job. Please don't use your posh flush cutters, that's all I'm saying. Anne says, sorry I missed the beginning. Do not fear, Petal. We have just made a memory wire. Now, why wouldn't I use this as a bracelet by itself? Why wouldn't I use memory wire as a bangle? Well, because it's shaped like so, but it's not designed to exist without a closure. Memory wire, if you go round 1.5 times, is a beautiful wrap-on bracelet, but you can't have like a 3/4 of the wrist and expect it to stay on. It simply will not. So I'm going to show you a way to add a clasp to memory wire in case you don't want a bracelet that circles all the way around the wrist. If you've got 3 or 4 beautiful Pantone strands, or even if you're lucky enough to have 7, you could simply put them on an almost endless coil and it would be beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous. Love these Pantone strands. They're so much fun to work with. So to get these sections, which are on the Leprechaun strand, they may not be on all of your strands, but I thought it would be fun to use them like this. You can open a memory wire loop pretty much once. So what we're going to do is open it like a jump ring, taking half of it and elevating that up. You can see the gap just there that I've created. And we're going to sneak this disc spacer inside the hole, and then you're going to close up that loop to make sure that everything is safe. If you do that repeatedly with memory wire, you will weaken the joint, and one day it will just snap and everything will be a bit bleh. So let's not make things that way, whatever that noise was, however you spell that. Let's avoid that at all costs. So this is a once only. Opening your memory wire as if it was a jump ring, so you can see that's opened out slightly. I have a question. Donna, the choker necklace you have on is gorgeous. What stone is that as a focal, please? Aventurine. Do you know what? These are all Let's Be Mermaids. Let's just hop up here for a second. It's a Let's Be Mermaids. All 3 colours together. I took the metallic beads and one of the charms. So that's a seashell charm. Seashell charm. Wow, that's actually really tough to say. So it's a blue enamel on gold. Thank you very much for the kind words, but it's all Jessie James beads, and it's all Let's Be Mermaids. And this is an old choker that I bought for a couple of pounds. It had green resin all over it, and I scrubbed it off with a wire brush and hammered it and just punched holes in it and did this. Let's get you back down to the board. Kim says, thank you again for your detailed explanations. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for that, Kim. I know that there have been comments in the past that I go on and overcomplicate things. The idea is everybody should be able to have a go. I want everybody to feel confident to be able to do what I'm showing you how to do. I don't want to gloss over things. So I'm going to post that into the gap and then make sure that I close that up, so that the very end of the memory wire sits against the angle that we created. So we're almost there now. We're almost there. So there are two parts to the next technique. We're going to form ourselves a bit of what I refer to as a J-hook. But you could use a pre-made clasp if you wanted to. Again, memory wire is fabulous. Not designed to be an open bangle. Unless you go 1.5 turns. Wow. I don't even know how to word today. If you go 1.5 times around, the memory wire bracelet works beautifully. And I've had some that I've made like 4 or 5 turns, which are beautiful. Hello, Gabriella. Welcome to today's Jessie James Beads Live. So that's where we're at. We're going to make a J-hook together now. If I put those two projects side by side, if you have a mini Impress Art hammering block, all's well and good. If you joined us on summer camp, you will have an Impress Art stamping hammer and block. Very, very good. I have my very old, very heavy steel block. I'm actually going to use my mini because it's easier to show you. It has very tiny little sound deadening bits, so it might get a bit noisy. So apologies in advance. Now you can use a 14 gauge or a 16 gauge for this section. I actually have a piece of 16 gauge cut. It's 3 inches in length. So there are two parts to this. The first part is creating the J side. Let's just grab my standard round nose pliers and put a very tiny loop on one end. That's a flush cut. That's not a flush cut. So I wonder if my nippers will do a decent job. Let's just check that out. Nope, they give a very, very wonky finish. So that's why we have flush cutters for our standard copper wire. So this is a 16 gauge, just slightly less now than 3 inches in length. And I'm going to put my flush cutters again away so I don't accidentally pick them up. I'm going to start by making a very small loop at one end. Grip the very end of that wire with the very end of your round nose pliers and just flip that over. I'm going for the smallest loop I can possibly muster. If it comes out a bit big, you can grip a hold of that wire and just squish it slightly. Just a little bit of a gentle squish. I'm going to put some warmth and heat into the rest of that wire now. And we're going to create a lovely looping shape. Now you could use a pencil or a round form, or your round nose pliers. I am going to grab my bail makers. In fact, actually, why don't we see if those little memory wire pliers are helpful? I think they will be. So I'm going to put the loop away from me and then rotate those memory wire pliers and the wire to create a nice swooshing, almost like a U shape. So my loop, my small loop is on the end and then it comes back. So we've made, I suppose, a bit of an S shape. It's very uneven, but that's what it is. Donna says, thank you, Jem. Your necklace is a stunner. I'm a mermaid in my alternate life. I think I'm a dragon. Or a flying unicorn. I used to know what that was called, but I've forgotten. Florence says, hi, beauties. Hi, Florence. How are you? Anne says, I've ruined my good flush cutters on memory wire. Learned my lesson quickly. Yeah, you only ruined the one set, right? And that's why my flush cutters are well out of reach. Just giving that a bit of a squish and a flatten. What I'm going to do now is just allow the wire, you can see where it's coming up towards the loop. I'm just going to bring that down a bit. Now I do want to have a bit of a gap here, so that I can get this inside one of those leprechaun hoops. You do need to check that the loop you've created will fit down that centre. So yeah, that works. So we're creating a custom J-hook today. So that's all well and good. What I'm going to do now is put an up angle like so. It's not completely 90 degrees, it doesn't have to be. It's, I don't know how many degrees this is, I'm not a mathematician. I'll put it on the flat edge of the block and you can judge. Don't understand maths if I'm honest, it's coming away like so. So what we're going to do is ignore this bit. We need this bit to be soft and floopy and not worry about it too much for right now. This bit we are going to smash. You don't have to smash it, but you can hammer it gently, let's say. So I'm going to grab my chasing hammer. If you were with us at summer camp, you will have a beautiful stamping hammer which will work equally well. Now I'm going to get smashing. You might wish to put your fingers in your ears, or perhaps just alternate the volume switch to low for a second. Ready? Can you see how that loop is opening as I hammer? This is par for the course with hammering. So I'm going to push that back around before I go any further, making sure there's still enough of a gap to get on my Leprechaun connector. Hold that back into position and just do the last little bit of hammering. I'm not getting too close to this loop, this section that's sticking up. One of the reasons I put that into an upright way is so that I can't accidentally hammer it. And I'm also going to put my thumb and forefinger over that angle. I want to protect that. I don't want to work hard on it at all. Ready? Noise! I've finished with the hammer. You can turn me back up if you want to now. There we go. So let's get that block back out of the way. Let's put the hammer out of the way so I don't drop it on my toes. You might notice that I really enjoy hammering. Oh dear. Put some little marks into my mat. Oh, Sarah's going to be mad. So what I'm going to do is look at my J-hook and ensure that that does go through the Leprechaun loop that we've created. That seems to work. That seems to look good to me. So what we're going to do now is put a circular form in this last little section. Now, despite the fact that we hammered a good 1/4 of an inch away from that angle, it will still have hardened the wire. So you can warm the wire in a number of ways. You can run it between thumb and forefinger, which is my favourite way. Don't be tempted to bring it back that way, because even though I've used flush cutters, that's still slightly sharp on the end. So run your thumb and forefingers away off the end of that wire. If you're ever struggling with sharp bits on the end of your wire, you can take one of those 4-sided nail blocks and just run it over the edge on the roughest part. You don't need to have expensive wet and dry sanding equipment. You can use a cheap, I don't know if you guys have like 99-cent stores. You usually get a pack of 4 of these things at a 99-cent store or Dollar Tree or whatever it is that you go to. They're not expensive and it's a really cheap way to help you with your wire jewellery. Thank you very much for your feedback, Paula. That's beautiful of you. So I've warmed that wire through. What I'm going to do now is create a round form down at the end. Now if you want lots of wire wrapping around on your J-hook, you will probably want to go for maybe 5 inches instead of 3 inches. I picked up a 3-inch piece of wire because that's what I had next to me. So I'm only going to get 1 or 1.5 loops. On the piece I made earlier, there are 3.5 loops of wire around the core of that J-hook. If I'm talking about things you don't understand, all will become clear in moments. So I'm going to find my round nose pliers. You could use your memory wire pliers. These are actually super useful. The circular, I can't speak though, the circular shape that we're going to create now needs to be able to fit around one of those sides of the Leprechaun loop. I'm actually going to call these Leprechaun loops now. Probably going to get into trouble for that, but never mind. So warmed that wire. We're creating a circular form now, and it's so much firmer than it was the first time we used it. So that needs to be large enough to fit onto one of these ends. I'm also just going to open that out slightly. Again, when we open loops like this, it's always like a jump ring. So pull 1/2 of that up to give you a greater access point. We're going to slide that onto one of those Leprechaun loops until it sits in position. And then we're going to finish by rotating this short tail of wire around the core of the J-hook. Now there isn't very much tail left over. That's just me being thrifty. I used a short piece of wire. Again, this is now quite firm because we've hammered further along. So what you might want to do is grip a hold of that circular form and put an angle on the wire first. Then when you start circling it around the core, it's more likely to be flat when you finish up. Like this one is flat in between the loop and the J angle. If you don't put this little angle on, what can happen is the wire spirals up loosely and it just doesn't look quite as pretty. So I'm going to grip a hold of that loop, which has closed up again, and push that first section around. Now that's quite painful on my thumb, so I'm going to employ a second pair of pliers to help me. Anne says we have both in the USA. Great idea. Instead of wet, dry sanding block, use a fingernail buffing file. Absolutely. They're inexpensive. I'm pretty sure it's within most people's ability to grab a couple of those, and it's not specialist equipment. Joyce says, I wrapped my one hoop on my workshop bracelet wonky because I didn't use an end metal bead on the one end. Could I cut it shorter and save it? I do have memory wire, looper and cutter. There's no reason why you couldn't cut it, put a new loop on. There's no reason to say that this has to have symmetry. Some of the prettiest bracelets, I work in a zero waste store, so I work with people from all walks of life. We have a great boating community, and people come in with some incredibly funky and quite ethnic jewellery, and some of the most beautiful pieces I've seen aren't symmetrical. They're simply beads that are just shoved on. So if you find that you need to just get one of those, or you need to take a little bit off the end because this is missing, what you might be best to do is start the whole thing again. Memory wire isn't that expensive. Or simply take off both of the bicones on one side. You'll then have a much smaller bracelet to work with, but you can make your J-hook much longer and maybe pop the beads in the J-hook instead. So when you're hammering, before you create the angle, let me just take you back a step. I love to get questions like this on the live because it means I can give you ideas on rescue, and I do love a good jewellery rescue. So rather than turn the angle up before you decide to do the hammering, decide if you want to have a bead in there to make the connector much longer. If your bracelet's much shorter, make the connector longer, yeah? So before you decide what you're going to do with a bead, you can hammer the J-hook, but leave a really long tail out to one side. Don't get too close. Put the angle in here, but don't put the upright one on. Do the hammering, add your beads in, maybe both of those, because that will give you enough room to put a new loop on the end where you missed the metal bead. And then you can add whatever beads you want onto the J-hook after you've done the hammering, and then you've got a great big long J-hook, and then you've got a loop to put exactly the same way as we are doing right now. If that sounds confusing, I'm very sorry. I didn't mean it to be confusing, but you can make the J-hook incredibly long. So in order to twist this last little bit of metal around, what I need to do is find a way to support the loop we've created. So I'm going to try and grip that without hurting my Leprechaun loop. So I'm just gripping the one section of metal. I'm not pressing down anywhere metal crosses over. I need to get a really good grip because I've got quite a short tail of wire to work with. With my second pair of pliers, I'm going to bring that around the central core on my J-hook. So because I need to put a bit more extra power into this, I'm hopeful that you can still see this. There we go. So I'm just going to bring that tail up and in and press that to the core. So that is still a very functional J-hook. And what we then do is slide that through your other Leprechaun loop, and you can just close that up ever so slightly. Sounded clear, says Joyce. Perfect, thank you so much for that. I do sometimes wonder if people have any clue what I'm going on about, because sometimes I don't. So we've got 2 strands worth of Leprechaun, 2 slightly different looking bracelets. Using memory wire for the main section, it's nice and strong, should last for yonks, but you could simply create this with beading thread and then just use the technique to create your own J-hook with those Leprechaun loops. It's entirely up to you how you want to work with that. As I mentioned earlier, I had a spare bead, which look like they really ought to be earrings now, but equally you could extend that J-hook by putting one of those in the middle. I will just run through that again. Make the J shape, but leave an extended length of wire off at one end. So the beads I'm using today, Anne, are the Pantone Strand in Leprechaun. Any 7-inch strand, especially the Pantone Strands, but any Pantone strand will work beautifully. If you don't have a strand with the Leprechaun loops, you can use giant jump rings, or you can very simply use the J-hook directly into the end of the memory wire, and the other end can be wrapped into the end of the memory wire. You've got the option then of extending out the centre of that J-hook to make it longer. So I hope that all is as clear as mud. Let me bring you back up to here. If you have any questions, you can either reach out now, or I will check in on the Facebook comments tomorrow and see if there's anything that wasn't clear. I really enjoy the Pantone Strands. They're an exquisite collection of colours and beads. There's metals, there's bead caps, there's spacers. There's always a variety of the colour as well. So the tones that I've got today are gorgeous. But equally you could go for root beer. Let me think what the other one was. I can't remember what the other one was that came to mind. Illuminating is good. I think I'm working with illuminating next week. We shall see. Cherie says the focal bead would make a great dangle. It absolutely would. Sissy is here. Hello, my love. How are you today? How's your life going? Big love to you. That's all the questions we have for right now. But like I said, I'll try to catch up on Facebook questions tomorrow, if not this afternoon, this evening as it is here now. And I'll be back with you Saturday next week, which will be the 27th. Had to look at see what the date is. At the regular time of noon Eastern. That's correct, yes. And then from that week, last time that I'll be here with you on a Saturday, I'm moving to Thursdays. Now that will be 1 PM Eastern from the beginning of September. I can't remember what the first September Thursday is, but that's where I'll be. 1 PM Thursdays after next week. Next week is still noon Eastern Saturday. That's my last one. Debbie says, loved your videos. Thanks for your clear teaching. Thank you very much. Gabriella says, thank you. Thank you for being here. Cherie says, thank you so much, Jem, for working with her gems. Bless you. Florence says, I came late. Are the rings that attach the S-hook, are they rubber? Comments disappeared. Basically, they came on the strand that we're working with today, which is Leprechaun. I can't tell if they're clay or super hardened rubber. You can treat rubber so that it becomes incredibly tough. Not sure what they are, but you could simply go directly into the loops you create on the memory wire, so don't worry if you haven't got the Leprechaun strand. Jacqueline says great tutorial. Joyce says thank you. It's been my absolute pleasure to be with you again. If your comments disappeared before I had a chance to give you a shout out, I'm terribly sorry. That's how Facey works. I will catch up with you next week live from noon Eastern. And then after that, I'll be off to Thursdays at 1 PM Eastern. Big love to all of you. Thank you so much for being here with me at Jessie James Beads. I'm Jem. If we've not met before, I live in England, and I'll be back with you next week. Take care, my darlings. Bye.